Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the New Hampshire Business Show. My name is Chris Pastrana, and today we're here with Scott Graves from Smash Music. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me today on this rainy but very summery Friday afternoon.
Yeah, rainy and humid summer afternoon. So let's get into it. Let's talk about Smash Music and what you do and go from there.
Smash Music is a full-service, what some people would call a full-charge music merchandising business. So we retail, repair, and rent band and orchestral musical instruments. This is a business that's in transition, so we also sell a variety of fretted instruments. Fretted instruments are instruments like guitars and mandolins and banjos and things of that nature. We also are a music education center, so our physical location at 25 East Broadway in downtown Derry, I've been converting into a much more varied and comprehensive music education center as compared to the old regime that was there. And something that's, I guess, entirely unique to us is that I converted part of the business over to being a makerspace. And it is a makerspace, or some people might call that a business incubator, that centers on the fine and performing arts. And in that way, we've been able to embrace our friends in other mediums of fine and performing arts and offer education offerings that are different but dovetail nicely with our music education services.
Yeah.
And doing that, the advantage there being that we help entrepreneurs that might otherwise not be able to afford a traditional lease situation in southern New Hampshire, but at the same time it helps me create an integrated arts environment for people looking to learn under a number of different mediums in the fine and performing arts without having to self-manage all of those programs. So those are, there's a lot going on at 25 East Broadway in downtown Derry for sure. We also have a number of other things I'm sure we'll get into this morning, but that is the sort of fundamentals behind the business.
That's pretty cool. So why music? Do you have a personal history with it as well?
I do. I have generally speaking, I have a personal background in both the fine and performing arts, going back to when I was a very young child. It's the realm that I was naturally gravitated towards, and I'm very lucky. I don't come from a particularly wealthy background, but my parents saw early on, when I was a very young child, that I had a sincere interest and passion in the arts, and they encouraged that from the time I was 6 or 7 years old, and it did turn into a career. I have a music business degree from the University of Massachusetts Lowell, and I've spent nearly all of my substantive career in the fine and performing arts as either an entrepreneur or an educator, and in a performing artist for much of that time as well.
That's pretty cool. So what type of stuff did you do when you were younger, as far as instruments and stuff?
Well, so I'm a what they call a reed man.
Okay.
I'm a flute, clarinet, and saxophone player, and most people, if they saw me come and perform over those decades, would have seen me playing saxophone, although I did equal parts clarinet and flute. And for many years, I used to say, people would ask, what kind of music do you play? And I say, the kind that pays green, which is my entrepreneurial way of saying any music really that people are willing to pay for. But in all seriousness, since this is America, this is the melting pot of both people and of culture. And I really, really enjoy the fact that you have a crossroads here culturally of any number of different styles of music.
Yeah.
And many of which evolved into different forms of American music. So I can't think of anywhere else in the world that is a better place to make music, to teach others how to make music. It's also a very challenging place to do that as well.
Yeah.
The arts do not get the support that they duly deserve in the general country, but nonetheless, all kinds of music. Most people knew me as a commercial player, top 40 and popular music of various kinds.
Yeah.
At my heart, I'm a jazz musician, if you want to get right down to it. And,
Yeah.
And so most of my formal training is both in classical repertoire and in the study of jazz, the great American music.
Yeah.
Our gift to the world, really.
I like it. I have zero music talent. And it always makes me sad because, well, it would just say zero developed music talent.
I like that better.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no such thing as a person that cannot make music.
Yeah. And I totally get that. It's something I've never done, even though I really, really love the idea of it. And, as a semi-professional dancer back in the day, I love music, like
Very cool,
a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. I just never been able to play any.
You have to tell me what kind of dancing.
Latin ballroom.
Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
so those were the ones I performed in. I liked them a lot, and I used to teach dance. So I totally get the music thing. I've always been jealous that I never learned an instrument. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Well, yeah, I have to tell you, we have several dance programs in my makerspace, and I cannot think of a better way for people musicians to sharpen their rhythmic skills and to come out of their shell. Believe it or not, a lot of musicians are very shy and a lot of artists in general are very shy, right, about their expression. But dance is at the heart of music and vice versa. So I can't think of a better way to really knock some sense into your rhythmic capabilities than to actually get out and
try to dance.
And dance. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's too funny. I like it. So let's see. So you mentioned that you have a lot of different types of businesses that come in. So is it like other teachers that just don't have spaces or something like that?
Yeah, good question. So, some of it is that. There is right now a heavy emphasis on the members of the makerspace to be instructors of some kind. As an example, our primary dance program is run by an entrepreneur. Her name is Jen Sasick. I always say Jen Sasick. It's called All That Sass Broadway Boot Camp. And she targets adult women, although there are some men now that take the program. And really, each class is demographically, it's split between women who are often doing regional theater here in southern New Hampshire and other parts of New England and want to brush up on their dance skills as part of that, right? Everybody in that realm of theater, whether it be professional or amateur, wants to be a triple threat. Well, these are people looking to really focus in for a time on their dance skills. The other 50% are simply adult women looking for an exercise routine that is not the gym, that is not going for a run, that is not, it's a break from the norm, I suppose. And in this way, the class itself is pretty dynamic as far as the different types of people that come together and get to know one another. That's an example of an entrepreneur it's a service-based business. It's an education-based business.
Yeah.
I have other visual artists that use our space for studio space to produce. They also use it to hang and to sell. We also have a former consignment store that did a lot of vintage vinyl LPs, which has become even bigger now than it was 20 years ago, and CDs and DVDs, and we have a portion of the makerspace that is dedicated to some of their inventory now that they've had to leave their original location in the Manchester area. So in that way, the story behind that is the owner of what was Thrifty's, a place called Thrifty's on Candia Road in Manchester, was looking for a place to have some of his inventory and continue that portion of the business. And for the 4 years that I've owned Smash Music, I repeatedly weekly get people coming in wondering where the music is.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm a music instrument store. And they said, oh, I thought this was a record store. Well, when those people come in now, I send them...
over there.
Yes. Find your way to the front of the makerspace, because, in fact, we now have something for them, too. And it dovetails nicely, particularly with our students who are learning different styles of music. And there are many albums that... are not on updated formats and downloads and that kind of thing, and it affords them the opportunity to find some of those recordings. And I think in general, people just like to,
browse around, look at it.
Yeah, it's and of course, for those of you that own a retail business, this will resonate with you. Even for the people coming in for musical instruments and whatnot, it's not just another revenue source for both Thrifties and for me as the makerspace owner, but it keeps people in the store longer. And the longer people stay in a store, the more they'll spend. The longer Economic Development 101, the longer you keep people in a downtown area, the more they're going to need to get some food, and they're going to need to go to the bathroom, and they're going to get bored and need to see something exciting.
Yeah.
And keep people in the general area, and it'll bear fruit. So it helps in that way. And it's a much better use of the space than what was happening in that space prior.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's pretty cool. So I'm going to do a quick break for the sponsors. Everyone, hold on. It's actually kind of funny, kind of getting back to something you had touched on earlier, about how you don't take music and instruments and all that stuff very seriously, or I guess arts in general, very seriously in this country. What do you think that is?
Well, I don't think there's any one reason, but I will touch upon a few of the main salient points behind that. Part of it is the way we see economics and economic development. If you've probably noticed, if you've done any traveling outside of the U.S., that in many parts of Europe, certainly even here in North America, the Canadians compared to the Americans, there's a lot more public funding of the fine and performing arts. And you say, why is that so? And why is it less so here? That has a lot to do with our politics. It also has to do somewhat with our culture historically. We prioritize fine and performing arts in a much different way, I think. Ben Franklin used to say we are a rougher race of people when he was trying to make the point that the North American colonials were a different nationality, right? They had become different, and therefore they needed to separate from England in his case. So I think that some of it is economics. Not that we do not have the money in the United States, but we don't want to put a priority on it. In general, and I say this, if you look historically, I think history is on my side on this, as countries become more authoritarian in their politics, they typically support artists less. What you have to understand is artists, whether they're amateur or considered professional, right? They're well known and they derive some or all of their income from their art, are generally speaking thinkers. And the best art, regardless of medium, asks questions of people. It demands things of people. It scratches certain itches and gets people thinking, and hopefully gets people talking and discussing different things. And there are people in circles outside of the arts that sometimes have a problem with that, right? For various reasons. I think some of it in the United States has to do with that, especially recently in maybe the last 30 or 40 years. In my personal experience, more than anything else, it really has to do with the way that the fine and performing arts are funded. Getting right down to smash music, and music merchandisers all over the country, there's two things we need. It sort of gets back to what Henry Ford recognized 100 years ago, and that was when he decided, right, that he was going to not make expensive cars for the elite, for the people who can afford a Cadillac or a Buick or a Stanley Steamer. He's going to make a car that's cheap and that you can get parts for it easy, and he's going to make his money selling it to millions of people. He then, at some point, recognized that if he paid his workers enough money and gave them enough time off, he was going to sell a lot more cars.
Yeah.
Right? And he, therefore, for many years after that, advocated that people, A, have enough money to buy a car, and B, that they have enough time off to use that car. I, as a music merchandiser of instruments and the repair of instruments and the education services related to selling that product, I need a strong middle class to have both time and money.
Yeah.
And that's been reducing since at least the 1970s. The golden age for music merchandising in this country tightly correlates to how much money the vast majority of the general public has, and also how much time they have.
Yeah.
So, and I'll draw this in even further for you, in southern New Hampshire, where so much of our economy really relies on the professional class getting up early in the morning and driving south of the border to derive their income. This, it's very interesting where we are in Derry, being so close to the border, because we often find that the people who have the most time and interest to come to the store sometimes can't afford the products and services we have. The people who can most likely afford the products and services we have often cannot afford the time necessary to interact with us at our physical location.
Yeah.
We've seriously, over the last 4 years, thought, well, how many days a week can we staff the store till maybe 11 p.m. or midnight? Because we have a certain amount of people that might participate, and now I'm directly speaking to less of the product side, but the service side, the education side. Because frankly, they don't hit southern New Hampshire again until 7 or 8 p.m.
Yeah.
And they do that more than 4 or 5 days a week. People who commute, I have people regularly tell me, I commute probably 3 to 4 hours a day, daily. So that's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
And this is probably nothing new. I mean, people in New Hampshire have been talking about how do we retain people, stateside? How do we keep them here? Not just to live, but to work as well. So if we solve that problem, that's really good for me.
Yeah.
Hearing that in Concord, that'd be really good for Smash Music and people like me.
Yeah. It's actually funny, kind of off topic, but I have a politician coming in after you, and so that's some of the things we're going to be discussing later on. So
it's a hot topic now, right?
Yeah.
How do we retain particularly young people?
Yeah.
Well, how do we retain them, because they're even if they come to school here, they're leaving afterwards. And again, most of the issues you bring up some great questions so far, and none of them have a simple answer.
No.
They're clear answers, but they're multifaceted, and we have to attack the challenges, I think, simultaneously.
Yeah.
But in measured ways. But if we do that, these are all man-made problems, by the way. So this is why entrepreneurs should never give up hope, because we can always solve them. They might take a generation or two, but we can solve these issues.
Yeah, and actually, the whole reason, one of the big reasons I started the show is to address the issue of people moving out who are in the film industries.
Yes.
Because that's a direction the show is going to be moving down in the future. So yeah, we directly started it to kind of eventually create something that people don't have to move to Boston or LA to be able to do some of that stuff around here. So yeah, kind of, I get your point.
Nice.
So talking about music again, since we've been talking politics and a little bit of everything else, I love music. I think we've hit on that already. And there's just something about, I don't want to say how it makes you feel, that it's good. I don't even know a way to put that elegantly.
There's no, I can only speak for myself, and I'm careful about this because it is literally different for everybody. And I say that because we are all, regardless of whether education addresses this or not or otherwise, we all filter our own reality through our own set of eyes, our own set of ears, our own nose, our own mouth, right? Music. Music is just one of many different languages that are innate in us. Okay, this is why I encourage everybody. People say, "Oh, I'm tone deaf." There's nobody that's really tone deaf. Or I don't have talent. That nobody has talent. Okay, talent is what people see somebody making good jazz music, improvising, and they say, "Man, that guy's got talent." How's he doing that? That's like magic. It's not magic. There are hours and hours of practice that go into it. So by the time you see it, that person, that him or her makes it look like it's magic.
Yeah.
But it's not magic, and anybody can do it. It's like successful business, right? How do we separate the successful people from the unsuccessful people? So much of it. I mean, there's definitely skill sets you need, but and you probably have experienced this yourself. A lot of it is the people who quote unquote made it. They're just the people who just never said no.
Yeah.
They just didn't stop. They had challenges come up. They didn't stop. Their competitors tried to buy them out. They didn't stop. People told them they were crazy to go into that industry. It's a failing business. They didn't stop. And they just kept getting up. When their family members, when everybody around them said, "You are crazy," they just didn't stop. And after a while, all the other people who did stop fall away, and we're left with the refinement, right? The end result, which is a person with a successful business that's got good market territory. Well, the same thing can be said about making good jazz or any other kind of music or any other kind of art form. Mm-hmm. And I think why is that way? It's innate in us. It goes back to when we would just coming out of the trees. People needed to express themselves to each other. As our brains developed, as we became more sophisticated, people had to shake their thing. They needed to communicate with each other in a more abstract and in a more beautiful way, and they had a need to just and they had a need to express themselves. You know what I mean? They couldn't explain the stars. They couldn't explain the seasons. They couldn't explain the water or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we created culture around us to help deal with that and help explain that. So I ultimately see music and all other forms of art as language.
Yeah.
And it's a more abstract and more beautiful language. And it's also, what's beautiful about it is that it's there for everybody. Mm-hmm. There isn't anybody who can't participate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we live in a very specialized society. So there's musicians and then there's non-musicians. That we got to get away from that.
Yeah. And one point that I do like that you made is music has and it's probably one of the strongest ways to bridge differences between cultures.
Yes.
So because even though you might not be able to speak the same language, you might not know anything about how they live, but we understand music, at least in a way that you can, like you said, you can listen to a singer who doesn't speak your language, but you can still find the music beautiful. You don't know what they're saying, you know nothing about it, but it still touches. So that's, I guess, one thing I really don't like about music is no matter who you are, you can listen to someone else's, like, their culture almost, and be like, oh wow, like this is really nice, and then you kind of get that flow going, which is pretty cool.
Well, there's two truly universal languages on Earth, right? One's binary code, and the other is music, right?
Yeah.
You can take somebody from India who has come up in the classical Indian tradition, and the basis of their music, theoretically, is something called a raga. Okay, so it's not a scale, but let's for our purposes, it's the closest thing they have to what we call a scale. Okay,
yeah.
And in Western musical tradition, we have various kinds of scales, little melodic motifs, right, that become the basis of something. Two people, one from Southern California and one from the subcontinent can get together. They do not speak a common vocal language that they can understand, and they don't even really come from the same harmonic musical language traditions, right? Mm-hmm. But yet they can get together and they can find a common ground based on the fact that they're two musicians.
Yeah.
Okay? So unlike binary code, the one thing binary code doesn't have is people don't of course, all the computer people in the world are going to hear this and say, "No, that's not true." Humans. There's a human approach. There's a humanness. Binary code does not speak to our humanity. How about that? I'll put it that way, right? So this is where I even feel the same way about dance or visual art, whatever, right? We can find common ground. In our art, in our food, right? There's all these ways that we express our humanity. For many years I'd go out on the road. Sometimes we were all white. Sometimes I was one of the few white people, if the only white person in the room. So, a mix of colors. People from different backgrounds. Some people came from very elite backgrounds. Some people came from nothing. That never came up. That we were all musicians, we were all common. Now, occasionally I'd hear stories from people about their different experiences, and you enrich yourself when you share these stories with people. You become brothers and sisters out on the road and teaching together and performing together and all that. But as long as you can make the gig, and as long as you played good enough that you get asked back the next day, none of that other stuff mattered. And if you look in history, this is part of the reason why artists typically are at the head of social movements, right? Because the only, Benny Goodman, right? He was one of the first white musicians that, come into the hotel and said, well, your guys over there can't eat with you. Okay, well, I'm not playing here tonight then, so we'll see you later. Looks like you need to find yourself a new band, right? All of that happened because through the art medium, through that, people found their common humanity, and they didn't ask any questions about, well, he's black, man, we can't have him in the band. Well, you know what? He plays, and he makes the gigs, so he's with us. Yeah. That's powerful, and that's one of the things when we educate children, when we educate young people to become successful adults, you don't get that in a lot of other activities. And that is something that's sorely missing when you say, well, we don't have the time in the curriculum schedule nor the money, really, to fund arts education. Well, one of the things you're going to miss is, you're going to create a cultural illiteracy amongst your student base. And that's a problem. That's a problem not just for the sake of art, but what we're alluding to right now. That can be a social problem, especially, when you've got people that are very vocal about separating people and keeping people in groups and stuff like that. Well, when you have moments like that, people who have been brought up to be culturally literate typically ask some serious questions when that stuff is going on. You know what I mean? So I keep going out on tangents, man.
No, it's really fun. So that's actually a pretty good space to leave off. People who want to reach out with you, learn some more, maybe schedule some stuff, how do they get in touch?
So you can find us on the web at yoursmashmusic.com. Mm-hmm. There you'll find out all the information on our services. You'll find out some retail, especially that of information on our exclusive makers. We have many instrument makers that we deal with globally exclusively, and almost all of them are in New England, if not New Hampshire. You'll also find information on our live performances and other types of live events that we have. And again, that's yoursmashmusic.com. The main number, for those that prefer calling us on the phone the old-fashioned way, is 603-432-7751.
Awesome. Thank you for joining me today. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to have the last word from our sponsors, and everyone have a great day. That's it for today, everyone, but it doesn't have to end there. Head over to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or iHeartRadio to get more from New Hampshire's top entrepreneurs.